After reviewing hundreds of law school applications, these are the top mistakes I see people making in their personal statements, even top applicants, and how you can avoid them. Law school personal statement mistake number one is telling a story without insight. So many applicants tell, what they think a college essay is. Or they're sharing something about themselves, telling a story that might reflect a character trait or just show a deep and meaningful experience. That is not enough for law schools. Law school is a trade school. The trade is using your mind. What law schools care about more than anything else is your ability to think critically, to think analytically about your experiences. So, to avoid falling into this mistake, you want to make sure that you have an analytical insight in your personal statement. So, what might that look like? This is where you want to use your experiences to show that you can think beyond yourself, that you're not just telling a story for a story's sake, but to make a bigger point. So maybe you had a really impactful experience with, Department of Human and Health Services. I'm thinking of a real client. Or maybe you had an experience with immigration services. So the story itself doesn't matter, it's the insights you gained from that. Even something more typical, like the typical pre-law activities. Maybe you worked as a paralegal or a legal assistant at a law firm. Maybe you had a political internship on Capitol Hill. Instead of just talking about what you've done or what you've experienced, you want to, again, draw the bigger insight. Maybe you saw how policy wasn't enough for the kind of impact you wanted to have. And you'd want to use your experiences to illustrate that point. Or maybe you saw how language barriers are more than just language barriers, but they're very institutionalized barriers across different systems, and law is a way to kind of navigate those different barriers. The point is that you are showing law schools that you can think critically, that you have the mind of a future attorney. So again, don't just write a narrative or a story, even if it's super interesting, even if it's dramatic and one of the most impactful things of your life. You want to always be able to still draw bigger insights that are more than just a story and more of just its impact on you. Okay, law school personal mistake number two is essentially writing your personal statement as a resume in paragraph form. This is also what sometimes I call a glorified cover letter, where you're talking about the things you've done and the skills you've gained from it and why that's going to make you a good lawyer. In theory, that sounds like it'd be really helpful for law schools to see, but they have your resume, and with a very curated and well-tailored resume, that resume should be more than enough for admissions officers to glean those traits, to glean those skills from the experiences you've had. You want your personal statement to do more than that. You want it to go deeper rather than broader. So it kind of goes back to the first point about having that analytical mindset and analytical traits reflected in your personal statement. So this also means you may not talk about everything on your resume because you want to have focus in your law school personal statement. You want to show how the experiences, the curated experiences, have led you to an insight that has then led you to understand why law is the inevitable next step for you. So again, the fix for this mistake is to make sure you go deeper, not broader, have focus, not a wide array only of experiences, and emphasize the analytical insights you have gained from those curated experiences rather than the skills that will make you a good lawyer. Law school personal statement mistake number three is choosing a personal statement topic just because it's dramatic or creative. This is one of the most common mistakes I see over and over again. A law school applicant thinks, wow, this was a very incredibly impactful, personally impactful experience I had, or this was a really dramatic experience I've had. I've had clients who come with really interesting stories, but if they don't connect to your why law and emphasis on your why law, not anyone's why law, then it doesn't really fit into what law schools are looking for. Because ultimately, your law school personal statement needs to answer the question, why is law school the inevitable next step for me right now? So for example, I had a client who she had a very traumatic experience being stopped by London airport security, being detained and being held for questioning, and because of her race and her immigration status. It was personally very impactful on her. But she actually didn't want to go into immigration. She didn't want to go into national security. She didn't want to go into anything that actually related to that experience. So while it doesn't mean that that topic didn't come up in other essays, you always have the statement of perspective, you have supplemental school specific essays. For the personal statement, it actually didn't fit in at all. She had a lot of other resume experience that was much more aligned with her real Y law, her true Y law, and that just didn't seamlessly fit in with that impactful experience. I see this a lot, and it can often be one of the things that holds applicants back from having a truly standout, high quality application. Because when it's these really personally impactful experiences, it can be hard to let that go. So, my advice is you got to kill your darling sometimes, and this is one of those times. So you got to think critically. Does this story actually relate to my true Y law, or at least to my curated Y law? And is it leveraging the most impactful experiences I have that will allow me to reflect that critical thinking that you're going to hear in this video, how important that is over and over again? So the fix for this mistake is choosing a topic that will most reflect how you think. And the final law school personal statement mistake that you really want to avoid now more than ever is letting AI write your essay. Now more than ever, people are using AI to write their essays. And now more than ever, admissions officers are highly sensitive to this. They want to see that you have thought critically about your path and not just relied on AI to come up with it for you. And more importantly, when you rely on AI to do the thinking for you, it flattens your story. It overgeneralizes. AI is great at finding patterns and coming to conclusions, but it is not great for reflection, for showing your individual insights and thinking about your experiences. And that is ultimately what law schools are looking for. And that's also what is going to make you stand out, especially among a sea of very overly polished, but frankly boring essays. It's going to be those little details that only you can think about. How did you react to a situation? What were the thoughts going through your head? What did you observe? All those little details that only you can have is what will make you memorable. And that idiosyncratic writing voice you have that when you put into any AI proofreader immediately becomes flat, becomes sterile. That idiosyncratic voice is something you want to preserve as much as possible in these cycles. I hear it over and over from admissions officers how much they love when my clients submit essays where they can feel their voice, where they can connect to their personality across the page. Because ultimately, until we have AI deciding these admissions outcomes, these are still humans on the other side of the page. So you want to write like a human. You want to connect with them like a human. I can't tell you how far that can go, and having someone go out on a limb for you and say, I want you in this school. I'm not crazy. I see the benefit of AI, but use it for maybe some organizing, some light proofreading. Don't use it for the thinking part. Notice that none of these mistakes are actually about the writing of the personal statement. They're about failing to show admissions officers how you think. And that's ultimately what the best law school personal statements do. If you're not sure, you're struggling with what to write about for your law school personal statement, check out my guide that'll give you some prompts and some brainstorming questions linked below.